Hi there, welcome to this video. Today we will discuss about a very important concept, guys, which is an important integral part of the triad of information security. When we talk about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, today we will discuss about integrity and file integrity monitoring. So, a very important video again for all the freshers who are out there who are starting their career in information security and cyber security domain, along with all the practitioners as well who are a part of the domain and want to understand more about integrity. So, without any further ado, I have Akshay Dikshit, who is a subject matter expert of cyber security in the field for more than a decade now, founder of a company called Anzen Technologies. Akshay, welcome on board.
Thanks for having me, Love. As always, a pleasure to be part of this community. Taking different cybersecurity topics, tools, and technologies, trying to explain them in a fashion which is understandable by people, making them aware about different topics that are out there, and just getting them with a central idea to getting them introduced to the concept so that they can explore this further. And a couple of topics taken in depth, couple of topics discussed at a general level. So in the same fashion, today we are talking about something called as file integrity monitoring. So as you rightly said, the basic idea of file integrity monitoring is the eye of the CIA triad, which is to say integrity. So if I have to explain or if I have to define file integrity monitoring, I would say file integrity monitoring is basically, so you could call it a process, you could call it an activity, you could call it a methodology, or from a risk term, you could call it a control, which is basically checking the integrity of the data inside your organization using different methodologies and techniques, and then throwing alerts or informing you whether an unauthorized activity has taken place or not. So at a very basic sense, this is what file integrity monitoring is. One thing I would like to say over here, which I talk about a lot when there is an overlap between a solution and a concept, is that file integrity monitoring in itself should be considered as a technique, should be considered as a concept, should be considered as a control. Now, file integrity monitoring can be done by various solutions. Some dedicatedly file integrity monitoring solutions, and some security solutions that provide file integrity monitoring as a feature. Right. So one thing to understand while we have started this session is that let's consider it a concept. Let's talk about this from a concept level, and then we will shift from a concept to a solution and what to expect from a file integrity monitoring solution. So moving forward, I will be using FIM as the short form, as an acronym for file integrity monitoring, which is FIM. So for anybody watching from this point onwards, when I say FIM, I'm essentially referring to a file integrity monitoring. Obviously, I'll try to use the original word, but please forgive me if I get into that acronym zone. So yes, so now the concept, the question here is why are you doing file integrity monitoring? What is the need of file integrity monitoring, right? So when we talk about different types of threats, Love, we have, and now we have discussed it so much that people who have been watching our stream of videos know that basically you can categorize your threat into an external threat and an internal threat, right? So now there are two aspects of it. If somebody from outside has gained access to your network and is trying to compromise either your server or your machines, or trying to do some illicit malicious activity, a cyber security attacker, as a cracker or a malicious person, file integrity monitoring is an additional security layer to tell you whether your important or critical files are being accessed or modified in an unauthorized fashion. Right? Now, this just doesn't stop here. So a lot of times there are questions when we discuss about threats. A lot of people say that, so you're okay in protecting with external threats, but what about internal threats? So when we talk about file integrity monitoring, it also caters to internal threats, because now the authorization aspect of the file or the data that is inside your organization will also monitor and check against whether an internal entity who is not authorized to modify or access this file is in fact accessing it or not. So when I say detecting malicious activity, it is to protect both from external and internal threats, because the concept of authorized activity comes in place. You're you are monitoring your data from time to time, and you are checking whether an unauthorized person has access. Now you could break that concept down into external and internal, but at a very core level, if you are not authorized to change a file, whether you are coming from an external network or you are coming from an internal network, for me it's an unauthorized activity and it should be monitored. That is the principle on which file integrity monitoring or FIM works, right? So one of the reasons or motives or use case of a FIM is detecting malicious activity, right? Other than this, monitoring unintended or accidental changes to files. So a lot of times when we are managing different data, a lot of time when we are handling a larger scale of data and there are a lot of people working on sensitive data, as a head or as a information security practitioner, or even as the department head or the owner of the data, you want to ensure that the data integrity doesn't get compromised either by intended malicious act or by accident or unintended act. Because for me, the data is important and unauthorized change should be prevented. The motive, the cause could be intended or unintended. It's the protection of the information or the data that needs to be checked. Whether
Akshay,
it's from, yes, yeah.
sorry to interrupt. I have a question from Shivkant. I know that we are just starting the video, so not want you to answer it right away, but just wanted to mention. He's asking how to confirm file integrity has been compromised. Example, in file with added payload, then how verify from original file? Is checksum method effective or not?
Okay. So I was going to come to this. Shivkant, so at a very basic level, and I'm going to come back to this later also, but to answer your question immediately, at a very basic level, the technique that file the, integrity monitoring or a FIM uses is in fact hashing or checksum. It's not limited to that, because there are techniques, and I will explain this as well when I'm talking about that. But at a very basic level, finding out the hash or the checksum, calculating the checksum of a file as a part of a baseline, and I'm going to touch base on this as well, is the basic functionality of a FIM, is to check this is the hash or the checksum of the file, and over time it will keep on checking the hash, and if the hash has not matched, either an alert will be raised or it will further get into some bigger analysis. So yes, you are right. Checksum method. So it's not, when you say is checksum method effective, there are ways to bypass it, but it is one of the techniques. So from a FIM aspect, just checking through checksum or hash is not effective. But yes, if you want to check at a very basic level, if you want to check whether a file if a file has been modified, if integrity has been compromised, hashing is one of the most basic or the very primary or the very first technique that is used.
Okay, great, Akshay.
Yeah. Okay. So now we come back to what are the different the reasons of having a file integrity monitoring or a FIM. So we spoke about malicious activities, we spoke about intended or unintended changes. it's also to keep a trail of the updations that are happening to a file, like an audit trail. So during or in the time of a troubleshooting or in the time of a breach investigation or at the time of an incident analysis, you know each and every data that is under the scope of monitoring which is in scope of your file integrity monitoring. You will get you would typically get like a trail of how many times it has been updated, modified, and by which user, right? So that ways I can keep a track and I can bifurcate activities of genuine or malicious or accidental. It is all by the same extension, you can also say that this is essentially monitoring your system health. Because, and I will tell you why, because this file can be your user created file, or this file could also be the required components for an operating system to function. So different configuration files, different system files could very well be part of the monitoring under a FIM. And this could also lead to continuously checking whether all my files and configurations required for normal operation of my operating system or my server are okay or not. Right? One of the great and most reasons for doing this is also meeting compliance mandates, because a lot of standards, much like your SOX, HIPAA and PCI DSS, require for you to have file integrity monitoring in place. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think PCI DSS requirement 11.5 in itself specifically states that you have to implement file integrity monitoring for the purpose of change detection to the security logs, to ensure that the log data, now they are specifically talking about log data, to ensure that this log data, which will be used for troubleshooting and incident analysis and breach identification purposes, should not be tampered with. Right?
So Akshay, just a question which is coming to my mind. So file integrity monitoring, is it a policy, is it a framework, or is it a part of a solutioning where people have to enable this thing? What is this actually?
So you could call it everything, Luv. So you can say file integrity monitoring is a practice. It's a technique. So you can use so see, in theory, Luv, you can use 5-6 different scripts. You can create your own client and daemon as well to achieve file integrity monitoring.
Okay.
File integrity monitoring at certain levels can be achieved by different solutions. So your IDS IPS may have FIM capability. Your endpoint detection tool may have FIM capability. Your antivirus may have FIM capability. You may have a separate FIM solution. And interestingly enough, for people who don't know, a value add, a good tidbit of information for watching this video is even you may achieve file integrity monitoring through honeypot and deception software. So basically, if you integrate a FIM capability with your honeypot, you get analytics. Security analytics, finding the trend of which types of files are being accessed, modified, and securing that in your real environment. So even though this concept in itself, file integrity monitoring, may be a little simpler to understand, but its applications are huge.
So Akshay, if I understand correctly, when you mentioned the PCI DSS case, so where they are actually mentioning that all the logs have to have a file integrity monitoring taking place. So they are targeting the logs here. Does that mean we can target anything, any particular data, right?
Yeah, so for example, let me take a couple of cases here. I think that's a great question, and for people to understand the utility of FIM, let me explain how different file modifications might affect you. Let me take an example of a web server compromise. So to compromise a web server, one of the important is the for example, your httpd.config file. Your configuration file of your web server is a file which when modified might contribute to malicious activities or might contribute to more might be an indicator of a compromise that has happened on your web server. So if an in an author, so why would anybody modify your basic, your core configuration files of web server in an unauthorized fashion? So must be an attack in progress. So just
Ah,
that feature in FIM might enable you to detect an active web defacement in progress. Maybe somebody has not been able to modify it, but is trying to access it. So the FIM will typically have the capability to even alert based on access,
oh, okay.
right? Now, another example, take the example of logs. What if I am, so in the attack process, if you remember, Love, when we were talking about ethical hacking, we said clearing tracks. When you're
Yes,
trying to clear tracks, you're trying to remove the your traces from the logs.
yes, logs, right.
So even if you have a FIM for the logs, it will be able to tell you that in fact we are at this stage of an attack. And the idea is, Love, wherever possible, insert security, inject security at each and every point. That is the principle. And once you have a solution, you have a toolkit, you have a feature, you have to utilize it at as many places because you need to increase your reach and you have to decrease the attack surface as much as possible.
Right, Akshay. Akshay, Shivkant has returned. Shivkant is asking, please provide some tool names for ensuring and validating file integrity. So he wants to know the software or application names.
So, Shivkant, a lot of IDS and IPS or specifically film-based solutions and a lot of vendors, well-known vendors, I mean, known people are offering film solutions. If you just Google top film solutions, you will get a lot of solutions. If you are looking for an open source version of it, there are a lot of open source film based solutions as well. I wanted to discuss it at the last, but then again, this is a a viewer driven session. So Wazoo is basically an open source security solution, and folks, a little out of context for this session, but if you want to explore a good IDS IPS or a great monitoring detection open source solution, Wazoo is a great platform. It is built on one of the great technology stacks that are out there, open source as well. And Wazoo has file integrity monitoring capabilities as well. So if you want to explore, Shivkant, get a copy of Wazoo, make a Vim virtual machine out of it, and try to explore its Vim capabilities, and that should give you a great understanding and a robust way of implementing and operating a Vim feature inside a security monitoring solution.
Great, great, Akshay. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. So now, since we have discussed what is the importance of it, the next question that somebody comes to somebody's mind is, what are you monitoring? You talked about data, you talked about files, but what is it that I should monitor? If I am talking about file integrity monitoring, what is it that I want to monitor? So and that's just again my own opinion based on your scenario, based on whatever attacks you're facing, and based on in your experience. uh,
Akshay,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt again. Satyajit Kulkarni is here. He is a new watcher, I think. He's saying, is it OSSEC?
Yes, yes. So I didn't want to name it, but yes, Satyajit, OSSEC is the OSSEC is the base project, and Wazoo was built as a fork of the OSSEC project, and so you can implement OSSEC. Also, Wazoo just has kind of extended its capability, better dashboarding, and a couple of robust features. So if you have worked on OSSEC, then Wazoo will not be a much challenge for you as well.
Great.
So
Akshay.
whether OSSEC has FIM capability or not, I do not know, because when I was working with OSSEC, I did not explore its FIM capability. But since I have experimented and worked on FIM capability of Wazoo, what I can say is Wazoo is derived from as a fork from OSSEC, but the FIM capability you might have to check.
Great, great, Akshay.
Yeah.
Mukesh, I will keep your question on hold because Akshay is explaining a concept. Post that, I'll ask this question. Go on, Akshay.
Okay. So now we are talking about, so and again, my opinion may be different for you. I will try to list down the most crucial files that typically you would want to monitor using a FIM. Cool. So ideally, so if I start with it, what you are essentially saying is, what do you want to monitor? That's the important thing. So you want to monitor the changes to your operating system. You want to monitor changes to your database. You want to monitor changes to your directories. You want to monitor changes to your application. You want to monitor changes to your critical business related or critical sensitive files. And what you essentially want to do is you want to get a real time or get a point in time alert if there is any suspicious change on these different types of data, right? So now let me bifurcate this, because there are majorly two platforms that we are working on, which is Windows and Linux. So on Windows, what are the different types of files that you would like to monitor as a part of FIM? So your boot up files, your passwords, your Active Directory data, your Exchange SQL data, your OS files, your system, Windows system files, your registry file. No, not maybe not registry, because a lot of softwares keep changes. So scratch that. So these could be typically some of the files that you would want to monitor from a core operating system. And I'm not including critical business files, because you are the person who will know what is the critical business file to your organization. From a Linux perspective, kernel parameters, different services and daemons that are running. You could also go for services in Windows environment as well. Not to say not, but since monitoring at a daemon and service level, it kind of becomes more crucial from a Linux environment, but you could go in for Windows as well. All the commands that are run, cron jobs, different profiles of users, different hosts that are connecting, all of these things you could monitor from Linux, right? Okay. So now we come to how does file integrity monitoring work. So in the similar fashion of what Shivkant asked, and good of him to bring that topic up, the very basic technique that would be required from a FIM is hashing. So essentially, hashing is basically creating a fingerprint of a data of a file, which is to say either you create a SHA-1 or an MD5 or a SHA-256 hash of that creates a unique string of numbers that are specific to this file, and this contributes to and this is attributed to this file, and over time you are monitoring for, and so this is the base hash that you have calculated. This is your baseline, and based on this, over time you are checking the hash values from time to time, and whenever you see a change in hash, you are saying there is a change in the file, right? Okay. Now, how does a FIM typically work? So FIM would also introduce other attributes along with the hashing. It will compare based. So to understand FIM, you need to understand what is baselining. So FIM implements the process of baselining, where what it's saying is that I am first establishing a baseline, which is a set of parameters and attributes related with this specific file. And then once I have established this baseline, with this baseline, I'm going to monitor. And whenever I see, based on the policy that you have configured, I will throw in alerts to. So along with the hash, you will have like file size, you will have the file content, you might have created, modified, accessed time, you might have security and privilege setting, you might have the core attributes and the size of it, you might have configuration value, and you might also add credentials. Right? So all of this, so if you have to summarize, what are the things that FIM might be looking for is your creation, modification, date time, your privilege, security and privilege settings, the content of the file, the size of the file, the uh, uh, hash value based on the file contents, along with the file contents, the configuration values, and also the credentials. So this is what a good FIM would typically look for or attribute against. So we talked about baselining, and we also talked about the parameters. Now, there are different modes in which a FIM would operate. So or if you are implementing a FIM, or if you are doing file integrity monitoring, you could make it in different modes. So there is a continuous mode, there is a snapshot, and there is a regular basis. So when I say continuous, it is when people say, if you are exploring for FIM solutions, you might say, people say that these vendors claim that real-time file integrity monitoring. That is to say, at any point in time, if there is a change, as soon as a change is made again and it violates a policy that I have created inside the FIM solution, you will get a real-time alert. Another mode could be a snapshot. From time to time, it is taking an entire snapshot of your information system or your file, and it is showcasing that snapshot to you, and you can then review and check whether there is a suspicious activity or not. Or at a regular interval, it will keep checking against the baseline, and as soon as the baseline is changed, it will throw you an alert. Right? So these are the three different modes in which a typical yes.
Akshay,
FIM could work.
I just wanted to ask, how can a user or an organization decide what kind of data that they actually want to put in the FIM, apart from the critical files that you just mentioned? Anything that is
Okay.
business sensitive?
Sorry?
Anything that is business sensitive, like critical to
Yes,
business?
yes, exactly, Love. So when I was talking about, if you remember, I mentioned your business sensitive files as well. So that is up to you. I mean, your intellectual property, your research files, your internal documents. When we talk about data classification, anything and everything that is confidential and secret
Got it.
should come into your FIM, under your FIM scope.
Right. Okay.
Right. So a FIM can be a good addition to your existing data protection strategy, along with your IRM and your DLP.
Great.
Right. So we made a callback to two different videos that we have already made, and for people who are interested on it, to understand the whole technology stack of data protection, you might want to go back and look at the IRM video we did and the DLP video we did. And we also discussed the difference and which one to use and how to use it. And I'm not going to say it here because I actually want you to go ahead and watch these because they are interesting videos. Yeah. So now we talk about from a good FIM strategy, good FIM framework, good FIM solution, what are you basically expecting? So you can monitor all types of your components. You can monitor network devices, you can monitor servers, you can monitor workstations, you can monitor remote devices. Go inside an operating system, you can monitor databases to the level of that not just integrity change in the database, a robust FIM, and I have seen FIM solutions like that, will also tell you the changes inside the table, in the database, which table, which value was modified. And to that level, you can configure a great FIM solution as well. If inside a database, I have a critical table, and inside a critical table, I have a critical value for which I want to modify, to that point, you can monitor using a great FIM solution. Some may give this feature, some may not. That depends on your use case. Cool. Then you could monitor your cloud based service. If you have data on cloud, you can actually monitor your cloud files, data residing on your cloud as well. You can monitor Active Directory, hypervisor, all of the things. Basically everything inside your IT infrastructure is what you can keep as a scope of your film, right? What is the minimum expectation? So the idea is, what are you basically expecting from a film, right? We talked about a lot of things. So you're basically saying that to provide change management, to basically help in your change management process, to tell you what updations are happening in this data, to give you real-time monitoring, real-time logging, to provide you audit logs, to have centralized logging, centralized management, and centralized alerting, to have features like access to the dashboard, to have email based alerting, and to assist in your compliances. That is the bare minimum expectation that you should have from a film solution or a film strategy, or if you are building your own film, which I usually discourage, but then it's on you, right? Again, to say that, if you have you might, if you already have a lot of monitoring and auditing solutions, you might, before investing in a film solution, and this is a great tip, you might want to ask your vendor whether they have film feature or not, because you already have this tool in your infrastructure. What if you can just talk to your vendor, enable this film feature, and then start with file integrity monitoring using their capabilities itself? So one thing to know is, know your existing tool stack, technology stack, and see if there are film features already as a part of your current technology stack. Now coming to one of the things, so there are some challenges, and I wanted to include this is because a lot of organizations, they try to implement film at a later stage, or are a little afraid of film because of some things that have happened. And so what I would like to discuss, the challenges with file integrity monitoring. One very big challenge is that it is resource intensive. It is continuously monitoring for files, it is generating attributes, it is generating base values. So you have and if today, Love, I create a simple script for you and I tell you just the baselining aspect, if I tell you to find the hash, run this script and find the checksum or the hash of all the files in the operating system, you can't imagine, it will take hours and hours, although taking out hash of a single file takes only a matter of seconds. And over time, your script starts consuming more and more resource and memory, CPU basically. So think of it from a film solution. If I'm talking about a simple script, how much resource intensive would it be for a film? So plan accordingly. So the idea is that people go crazy with film. When I have brought a film solution, I will monitor each and every file and I will include all attributes. Now here comes the second challenge, which is you get so many alerts, you get so many false positives that it becomes very difficult to bifurcate between the false positives and an actual unauthorized attempt. So the solution to the first challenge is having a robust infrastructure. Only monitoring the files which are sensitive. Start small and expand from bottom. So first monitor your operating system, database files and business critical files, and start building over it and testing your solution over a period of time. Second is to only enable the policies which are really of use to you. Don't enable each and every policy, each and every check, and every time it is accessed, you should get an alert. You will be burdened, and your incident response or your monitoring or your security operation teams will be burdened with just handling the alerts related to your film. So these are the two things to keep in mind. One other thing that I can think of is a lot of solutions are not cross-platform. So if you're implementing film, if you're purchasing a film, you might want to consider Mac operating system, Linux, as well as Windows. So when you're searching for it, make sure whichever film you have is kind of catering to all types of platforms. Yeah. So yes, Love, I guess we covered almost.
This is one of the questions that I was actually wanting to ask you, Akshay. You have actually addressed it before only. So I wanted to ask, what are the potential pitfalls of any organization who is trying to implement FIM? So you have
Yeah.
already answered that part. Second question, and without startups there is no video. So is this a critical functionality or a critical solution for all these startups out there, or as you rightly mentioned, some of the solutions would already have this capability in them?
Yeah, so this file integrity monitoring as a concept is important, Love. As a technique is important, but you may not want to invest immediately as a startup in a FIM solution. Uh, there are ways to implement file integrity monitoring through open source solutions. There are ways to implement file integrity monitoring through some dirty scripting. If the data that is being under scope is lesser in quantity, in number, is known, is limited, then you need to ensure that you can do it through some techniques or workarounds. But when an organization grows, Love, when we do data classification, and the scale of the critical data and the data to protect is huge. So in that case, you might want to evaluate a full-fledged FIM capability either in your existing solution or in a separate FIM software or a solution.
One thing more I wanted to ask before I jump onto the other questions that I have. Is this something that people can implement on their own in a startup company, or does this require some kind of consultation help from Anzen or some third party companies?
So, Love, before you implement a FIM, you need to understand what important data to you is. Call back to data classification. You need to identify what sensitive data for your organization is.
Right, absolutely.
So if you have data classification in place, then you might want to directly get this implemented, but you still, so basically in these types of solutions, Love, what is needed is first defining a proper roadmap, dividing it into stages, because immediately monitoring all files becomes a great overhead on the SecOps team, on the security operation team. So you might want to implement this in stage, and here is where a professional person comes in. He will start with the baseline, also helping define the baseline. Who is going to define the baseline? See, a FIM solution will monitor anything and everything. It has the capability, but who is to define what the baseline is going to be? What are you going to monitor? What makes sense for you? See, and I'll tell you why. What is the baseline for you might be an additional cause of false positive for some other organization. You might want to monitor a specific, it's like saying, Love, that some people say that I want to log each and every successful logging attempt as well. Now, do you understand, if you're logging each and every successful login attempt, how much of logs are you generating? A smaller organization might not have the bandwidth or the storage space to have these much logs, but a larger organization might. Depends on the types of attacks and types of monitoring strategy that you want to implement. That's the vision of the CISO and his team. So for you to identify the right parameters, the right policies, the right data classification, the stages in which a FIM should grow, and to continuously monitor, you need a professional advice. Now, how much of a depth you need to get into, that is a call you need to make along with the partner that you want to engage with. Yeah.
Great, Akshay. So by the time I jump on to the questions, guys who all are there in the live stream, if you have any questions related to information security, data security, cyber security, any of the standards, ISO 27001, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, any compliance standards you want to ask, anything and everything related to cyber security, feel free to shoot your questions. Akshay is here with us, and we'll surely try to answer them. So post that, Akshay will have his concluding notes, and we will conclude this video. So the time is less. If you are there, if you want to ask questions, feel free to shoot. So Shivkant is saying thank you so much. He's sending good vibes, and he's suggesting everyone to wash hands also. So Shivkant, nice suggestion. I would again highlight this at the end of the video. Sure. So Mukesh is here. Akshay, Mukesh wants to know what are the security benefits in implementing a virtual server compared to a physical server. I know this is off the tangent, but he wants to know, is virtualization better from a security standpoint?
Okay. Yeah, so I'll take this. It's a good question nonetheless. So Mukesh, see, with virtualization, so I'm not talking about the obvious benefits. Because you're speaking only from security standpoint. So what you can do, most of the features of security monitoring, which is on physical server, can also be done on virtualized machines. Is just that with virtualization, from attacks, in a lot of cases, and again, this is case specific, there are exceptions to what I'm going to say. Lateral movement from host, so from guest to host or from guest to guest, becomes difficult. It's not to say that it's not possible, it's just to say that in virtualized environment, the technology implemented and the configurations can be configured as such that they will simulate a physical server, but lateral movement in case of malware infections, in case of APT, becomes difficult, not impossible. So yes, personally, I would say yes, because virtualization is cost effective, and the cost that I save on virtualization, I can implement on security controls. So yes, virtualization is better from a security standpoint than a physical server. Having said that, there are a lot of robustness and features involved with a physical server that you cannot replicate in a virtualized server. That is why, basis on the type of application or the type of data, or the type of service that you're catering, for some you use a physical server and for most you use virtualized ones.
Also, Akshay, I think couple of added advantages which I clearly see. So security management overall, is more easily configurable in a
Yeah.
virtual environment, right? Where you have a single hypervisor, all the VMs are clearly, segregated. So it's more easy. So IT infrastructure, resource, time consumption is very less in
It's
that case.
basic. So love, that is why I did not touch
Yeah,
point on it, because I'm saying it's ease of use, which is the
absolutely.
major winning point of
Yeah,
virtualization. But if I
yeah.
take it out and if I speak specifically for security benefits, a couple of them which I mentioned, otherwise the ease of use, and that's the whole point. See, if we talk about it holistically, if you're spending less time on management, you're spending more time focusing on security. So by that logic, that is why I said, right, that is why it is better for security, not by itself from a technical standpoint, but also from a ease of use, from the cost saving which could be put then into better security controls.
Yeah. Also, just to add one more thing to the security model, in hypervisors, you can actually define a universal security model, which is applicable to all the VMs in that particular hypervisor. So, a single security policy and procedure can actually help all the VMs, guys. So, it is actually more helpful from a security standpoint. So, Akshay rightly mentioned that. Great, Akshay. So, Akshay, I cannot see any more questions here. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot. By the time, Akshay, feel free to add your concluding notes.
Yeah, so again, when we talk about data protection, when we talk about regulatory compliances, when we talk about HIPAA, when we talk about PCI DSS, when we talk about SOX, what essentially we are saying is that a FIM capability, a FIM feature, a FIM strategy is an added layer of security, is a compliance requirement that is met by these regulatory standards, and is a good to have a better visibility in your organization of how data is being consumed, who is accessing it, how is he accessing it, whether it is an internal threat or an external threat. If there is an unauthorized change, you will have audit trails, you will have better incident response, you will have better enhanced incident analysis, enhanced breach analysis, and a better visibility. So a FIM will never harm you if you have the budget, if you have the strength, if you have the team to do it. I would really suggest to go for FIM because it provides that additional layer that is just amazing. And great thing, I think I forgot, a lot of SIEM solutions also have FIM capabilities now. So you might want to explore, and you can, it can become a great part of your security operations, your monitoring, and help in your detection and response of different types of breaches. And even when somebody is doing an advanced persistent threat or an APT attack, the modifications of files, even if there is a hack going on, which is modifications of log data, or like I mentioned, the case of hacking a server, you can monitor the files and detect attacks at an early stage or while they are going, and thwart the attack. If you remember the cyber kill chain, again a call back to one of our videos. Yeah.
Yes, great session, Akshay, and thank you so much for helping everyone to understand the file integrity monitoring solution. And I really, understand that people are getting a lot of value from these videos. Mukesh also said that he's actually got the answers. So, really happy for you taking out your time and creating all these videos with us, Akshay, and appreciate all your time and efforts. Guys, if you have any questions, if you want even to add on to anything what we have mentioned here, feel free to comment if you have any questions to these videos, and we will, of course, as always, we will keep on posting these videos for you. And feel free to share these videos, guys. Feel free to subscribe to this channel and take the word out and spread the news about these videos, so that more people can join, more people can get their doubts clarified, which they are not even able to get clarified even post paying hefty amounts. So that's the case, that's the cause why we are here, guys. Make sure that you do that. Make sure that you join this live stream every day, and make sure that you get your questions answered. Without any further delay, I would again like to mention Shivkant's comment here, because he rightly said that this is the pandemic situation. So we actually should all stay inside and just try to wash our hands as much as possible, because this is the safety precaution, guys. So stay safe, take care of yourself and your family members, guys. Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks. Take
Thank you.
care.
Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.